Hello, everybody. I welcome you all for this online session. మీ సెలవులు ఎలా గడిచాయో అని అడగటానికి కూడా భయంగా ఉంది. Let us all hope that we come out of this pandemic with least misery. Part of 2016లో హౌ కిడ్స్ లెర్న్ రెసిలియన్స్ అంటే పిల్లలు ఆటుపోట్లకు తట్టుకోవటం ఎలా నేర్చుకుంటారు అనే వ్యాసం ఈ మధ్యనే చూసాం. అనేక పరిశోధనల సారం ఆ వ్యాసం. రీసెర్చ్ షోస్ దట్ non-cognitive skills like resilience and grit make a big difference even in the academic success of children. అంటే నాన్ కాగ్నిటివ్ స్కిల్స్ మనం టెక్స్ట్ బుక్స్ నుంచి ఫార్మల్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ నుంచి నేర్చుకుంటున్న స్కిల్స్ కాకుండా ఇతరత్ర స్కిల్స్ మనం డెవలప్ చేసే వాటికి మన అకాడమిక్ సక్సెస్కి చాలా దగ్గర సంబంధం ఉంది. ఒకదానికి ఒకటి బాగా సపోర్ట్ చేసుకునే విషయం అది. ఇంగ్లీష్లో కూడా గ్రిట్ అనే పదం వాడకం నేను ఎక్కువ వినలేదు, కానీ గ్రిట్నెస్ ఇంప్లాయిస్ సస్టైన్డ్ ఇంట్రెస్ట్, సస్టైన్డ్ ఎఫర్ట్ ఇన్ అచీవింగ్ లాంగ్ టర్మ్ గోల్స్. తరగని ఆసక్తితో, నేను అదే మాటను గ్రిటీనెస్ని తెలుగులో నా మాటల్లో చెప్తున్నాను, తరగని ఆసక్తితో అలుపెరుగని కృషితో దీర్ఘకాలిక లక్ష్యాలను సాధించడం. నిజంగా చాలా గొప్ప మాటగా అనిపిస్తుంది నాకు. గ్రిట్టి నిజంగానే తరగని ఆసక్తితో అలుపెరుగని కృషితో దీర్ఘకాలిక లక్ష్యాలను సాధించడం అనేది నిజంగా చాలా గొప్ప క్వాలిటీగా అనిపించింది. నేను ఆ మాటతో గ్రిట్ అనే దాన్ని మనం వాడుకలోకి తెద్దాం మన వికాస విద్యావనం కమ్యూనిటీలో. మన వికాస విద్యావనంలో పిల్లల సమగ్ర వికాసమే లక్ష్యంగా చేస్తున్న కృషిలో నాన్ అకాడమిక్ కార్యక్రమాలకు విద్యా ప్రణాళికలో ప్రాధాన్యతనిచ్చాం. మనకందరికీ ఆ విషయం తెలుసు. ఆ కార్యక్రమాల పట్ల పిల్లలకు ఉండే సహజమైన ఇష్టం, ఆసక్తి, ఆ కారణంగా నాన్ కాగ్నిటివ్ స్కిల్స్ డెవలప్మెంట్కి ఆ కార్యక్రమాల సమయంలో, అంటే నాన్ అకాడమిక్ కార్యక్రమాలు సమయంలో ఈ క్వాలిటీస్ని, ఈ స్కిల్స్ని, నాన్ కాగ్నిటివ్ స్కిల్స్ని డెవలప్ చేయటానికి ఎక్కువ అవకాశం ఉంది మన నాన్ అకాడమిక్ సమయంలో. కాకపోతే పిల్లల స్కూల్లో ఉన్న సమయంలో లైన్ షేర్ అంటే సింహభాగం అకాడమిక్ యాక్టివిటీస్తోనే ఉంటారు కదా. ఆ సమయంలో కూడా నాన్ కాగ్నిటివ్ స్కిల్స్ డెవలప్మెంట్కి ఏమేం చేయగలము అన్న దానికి శ్రద్ధ పెట్టాలి. దాని లక్ష్యమే ఈరోజు మనం ఏర్పరచుకున్న ఈ సెషన్ లక్ష్యం. అది ఆ పరిశోధనా వ్యాసంలో చెప్పిన మరో ముఖ్యమైన విషయం ఏమిటంటే స్ట్రెస్ అంటే మానసిక ఒత్తిడి గురించి. రెసిలియన్స్ అండ్ గ్రిట్ లాంటి నైపుణ్యాలు అలవడేందుకు అడ్డం పడే ప్రధానమైన అంశంగా స్ట్రెస్ అదే మానసిక ఒత్తిడిగా కనుగొన్నారు. అది పరిశోధకులు కనుగొన్న విషయం. అది వాళ్ళను సర్ప్రైజ్ చేసింది కూడా, కానీ నన్ను ఏమాత్రం సర్ప్రైజ్ చేయాల. ఆ స్ట్రెస్కి మూలం రకరకాల భయాలు. చదువుల పేరున పిల్లలు రకరకాల ఒత్తిళ్లకు లోనవుతున్నారు. క్రమశిక్షణ పేరుతో శిక్షల భయం, వయసుకు మించిన పుస్తకాల బరువు, తోటి విద్యార్థులతో పోల్చి చిన్నబుచ్చటం, అర్థం కాని బట్టి చదువులు, మార్కులు ర్యాంకుల వేటలో సమబుజ్జీలు కాని వారితో పరుగు పందెం, బహుమతులు రావనే భయం, మాటలు పెగలని ఇంగ్లీష్ మీడియం కష్టాలు, వయసుకు మించిన సిలబస్, విసుగు పుట్టించే హోంవర్క్, ఏమాత్రం సుఖం లేని స్కూల్ యూనిఫామ్లు, పొరుగువారు ఏమనుకుంటారో అని పిల్లల్ని కష్టపెట్టే తల్లిదండ్రులు, నిజం చెప్తే ఏం చేస్తారో అన్న భయం, అబద్ధం చెప్తే పట్టుబడిపోతామేమోనన్న భయం. ఇదే అన్ని భయాల మధ్య, భయాలు ఆల్మోస్ట్ తప్పనిసరైన విషయంగా తయారైంది మన పిల్లల ప్రపంచంలో. ఈ మధ్యనే పిక్సార్ వాళ్ళు 7 నిమిషాల వీడియో చూశాను, ఫ్లోట్, యూట్యూబ్లో ఉంది, తప్పకుండా చూడండి. పిల్లల్లో భయాన్ని లేకుండా చేస్తే ఎన్నో అద్భుతాలను చూడొచ్చు. మిరకల్స్ కెన్ హ్యాపెన్. ఫ్లోట్లో చూపించిన అద్భుతం జరగకపోవచ్చు, కానీ చాలా చాలా దానికి దరిదాపుల్లో ఉండే అద్భుతాలు చాలా జరిగే అవకాశం ఉంది. మనం ఆ అద్భుతాలకు నోచుకోలేదు. మనం ఉన్న నాగరిక సమాజంలో అసలే భయాలు లేకుండా చేయటం అసాధ్యమే అని ఒప్పుకోవాలి. వాటికి తట్టుకొని నిలబడే స్థైర్యాన్ని ఇవ్వగల వాతావరణం సమకూర్చే ప్రయత్నం జరగాలి. మన తరగతి గదులను ఆ దిశగా మార్చుకునే ప్రయత్నం చేద్దాం. జీవన వికాస విద్యావనం టీచర్ అనన్య, హైదరాబాద్ ట్రిపుల్ క్రీక్ మాంటిసరీ స్కూల్ టీచర్ ప్రీతి ఈ సెషన్కి సారథులుగా వ్యవహరిస్తున్నారు. ప్రీతి వికాస విద్యా సంస్థ జనరల్ బాడీ సభ్యురాలు కూడా. నేను ఈ సెషన్ని కండక్ట్ చేయవలసిందిగా అనన్య, ప్రీతి వాళ్ళకి హ్యాండ్ ఓవర్ చేస్తున్నాను. అనన్య, take it over.
All right. Hello, everybody. As sir already mentioned, my name is Ananya and I work with Vikasa Vidyavanam as a teacher. So today we're talking about belonging, independence, and growth in our classrooms, right? But before I start talking about these terms, we're going to take a little bit of a step back and talk a little bit about teachers, okay? So we'll start with this reflection activity. I want you to think about a teacher from your own life, a teacher that you really, really like, okay? And now think, what is it that this teacher did that made me like them so much? I would like you to take 2 minutes, write down your answer in the chat box. What is it that your favorite teacher did that made you like them so much? Okay, we have 2 minutes, our time starts now. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box and see what people are typing. You need not write the teacher's name, just a small activity. So Manoj says being friendly. Someone is saying they encouraged and entertained students to ask more questions. They made the content the right amount of challenging. They made the subject look very interesting. I'm just going through the responses in the chat box. Nikshit says, they gave an extension in my assignment when I needed them. Someone is saying they would always smile and have a positive attitude. They showed trust and encouraged my approach to learning. They made us laugh, did not scold us. Their energy and involvement in the classroom was something that was important. They gave us feedback and encouragement. I'm waiting to see a few more responses. We have 30 more seconds to do this. I know everybody has not typed in their response, so if you are typing, just quickly finish up and send him down. All right, so that was quite a few things, and I'm glad that you can still remember these small little things that made these teachers your favorite beings. Nandana says they made their classrooms a happy place. So we're now going to move on from talking about teachers. We will now take a little bit of a jump and talk about classrooms. At the end of the session, we will come back to this idea of teachers, don't worry. A little bit about how the session will look like. So me and Preeti will be talking for about 30 to 40 minutes. During that time, there are going to be a bunch of reflection activities for you to undertake. So it would be nice if you have a notebook and some kind of a note-taking device next to you to do that. And at the end of the session, we will have a good amount of time for your reflections, questions, and answers. So in case, as the session is going on and there is a thought that comes into your mind, there's a question that comes into your mind that you think everybody should know about, or you would like to ask people around us, just note it down. And in the end, we will take it up. Okay? So let's begin. When I talk about classrooms, or when we talk about classrooms, what is it that generally comes into our mind? You know, an image like this. Maybe your classroom looks slightly different, but what is generally happening in a classroom? So there might be a teacher speaking, maybe children might be listening, some students are talking to each other, some children might be working together to solve a problem, maybe they're trying to create something. Sometimes we also have children communicating with each other about their personal issues apart from what's happening in class. It also involves a lot of thinking. So maybe they are thinking about what was taught to them earlier, or maybe they are thinking about what is taught in today's class and how can I use it to do a difficult problem or to think about it further. Right? A whole bunch of activities takes place in a classroom. And broadly speaking, all of these skills or these activities can generally be divided into two abilities that Parmi sir already sort of touched over. Let's move to the next slide. So these two are basically your cognitive abilities and your non-cognitive abilities, which are also popularly called as socio-emotional skills. So what are cognitive abilities? Basically, generally speaking, when we're talking about any kind of academic class performance, when we are talking about, okay, I want my children to learn how to do math. I want my children to learn how to be better at English. I want their grammar to improve. I want their scientific reasoning or mathematical thinking to improve. When I'm talking about these skills, we generally refer to kids' cognitive abilities. Yeah, their memory. How much are they able to remember? Their thinking, attention skills. Are they able to pay attention to the tasks given at hand? Their motor skills, body movements. Are they writing properly? Are they moving around when a task is given to them? Decision making or critical thinking. Again, involving a lot of what to do, how to do, and the best way to do it. All of this is generally cognitive abilities. And when we end up talking about classrooms, a lot of discussion ends about falling on cognitive abilities. But as Parmeswar was saying, in the recent past, a lot of research done over children's performance in classrooms, their behaviors in classrooms have shown that not just cognitive abilities, but the non-cognitive abilities or the social emotional skills also play a great role in this respect. Right? So sir was already mentioning some non-cognitive abilities like resilience, grit, empathy, right? All of these skills play a major role in classroom performance. How? Okay, so let's look at a few examples, right? Let's say in 6th grade, we are teaching our children integers, right? And up until now, we told our kids that, hey, listen, you can never subtract a big number from a small number. But 6th grade, we introduced them to integers, and suddenly there's a whole world of these negative numbers. And we're like, oh, what I told you earlier is not true. You can actually subtract 7 from 2 and it's correct. There is a right answer to that, right? So concepts, as kids are growing older, start to get more and more challenging, right? They start learning new things. Within each subject, the depth of the subject just keeps increasing every year. And to keep up pace with that requires a lot of grit and self-esteem from a child, right? For a child to feel that, okay, things are getting difficult, but it's okay. I can understand it. Even if the teacher is explaining and I did not understand it the first time, if I put in effort, continuous effort, I try, I can succeed, right? That's what your self-esteem, your grit is all about. There could be other kinds of issues. Let's say you have a child who's coming into your classroom who recently lost someone they were very close to in their family. Maybe they lost a parent. And this child is coming to class after a long break. And now we expect them to move on with their lives, to just kind of pick up on the classroom, right? Now for this child to be able to understand that, okay, something happened at home, but I can leave it aside, I can focus in my class when I'm in class, requires a lot of resilience, the ability to bounce back from difficult problems, and a lot of optimism, a positive attitude for them to work through. Right? Then similarly, their classmates required for them to provide them, an empathic environment where the child feels comfortable enough to succeed. Right? So that was just some examples to see how these two go together. And if you think about your own classrooms, I'm sure you can come up with multiple other examples. Yeah. So everybody is just saying that non-cognitive skills are important in a class, apart from cognitive skills, then our task is pretty simple, right? All we need to do is teach our kids non-cognitive abilities, and we're sorted. But the problem is that it's not that simple, right? As all of us clearly understand. So before we talk about how can we develop social emotional skills, I'm going to take a step back and talk about how these skills develop in the first place, right? So if you go on the next slide, we see that, okay, there are two important factors here. One is the child's family environment, and the other is the child's school environment. I'm going to be focusing about the family environment and how that plays a role in these skills. And Preeti will later on be picking up about the school environment. Okay, so next slide, please. Right. So most of these non-cognitive skills actually develop way before a child even steps into the class, way before they even get admitted into schools. A very important factor playing a role here is early parent-child interactions, right? So when a small baby is at home and they need something, they immediately start crying. Maybe they're hungry, maybe they're feeling sad or lonely, maybe a mosquito bit them and they're feeling hurt, or maybe they just poop their pants and they need to be changed. Either of these cases, all the baby is going to do is start crying. And immediately a parent comes rushing in, they pick up the baby, they hold the baby, they soothe the baby. Maybe they feed it or do whatever is it that the child needs. Such repeated interactions between the parent and a child over a long period of time is what sets the tone for the development of these non-cognitive abilities, right? As the child is growing older, where the child actually learns to communicate, they can actually speak. As they grow older, the way that the parents respond to the child's needs is very important. So is the communication that is happening between the parent and child, is it healthy? Or does the child feel that, okay, if I have a problem, I can go talk to my parents, right? If I feel a problem, I can go talk to them and they will listen to me, right? A child growing up with enough physical support, emotional support, a kind of a healthy, secure and nurturing environment grows up with a head start towards developing these abilities, right? So before they come into our classrooms, they've already learned a lot of these non-cognitive abilities really well if they come from such secure family environments. Another factor to pay consideration to over here is on the next slide, which is our natural stress response, which is popularly called as the fight or flight response. Now, what's the stress response? Let's go like years and years ago in the past in history, and imagine when we were not living such civilized lifestyles, but our ancestors were still living in the jungle. Yeah. So when, let's say, any of our ancestors were in the jungle and they suddenly came face to face with a huge animal, a tiger maybe, who's bigger than them, faster than them, right? The moment that happens, our brain sends a signal to the rest of our body that, hey, there is a danger. You need to either fight with it or you need to run away. That's the name, fight or flight response. So on this image, you see a bunch of body parts being labeled in the diagram, and this is what basically happens to your body, right? So maybe your eyes, pupils would dilate so that more light can go in. You would start taking deeper breaths. Your heart starts pumping faster so that you can, there is more blood in your limbs if you were to decide to run. Many such changes happen, right? And once the person has dealt with the dangerous situation, the danger has passed away, or maybe they have run away, the body's physiological response would go back to normal. So your heart would come back to beating normally. Your breathing would bring back to normal. Now, this is our body's healthy response to stress. It's existed since ages, and it is an extremely healthy way of being. This kind of a stress response is good for us. The problem arises when this stress response becomes toxic, right? When I say a toxic stress response, I mean two things. Number one, that a person who has a toxic stress response, their body takes longer to go back to normal after initial the danger has, increased their heartbeat and raised their breathing rates. The second thing is it is experienced way more often, more than a typical person would be experiencing that response. A person with toxic stress experiences it way more often. On the next slide, I will explain how a toxic stress response actually gets built, right? So if you look at this, there's an image. So this one image which talks about positive stress, where the child is facing a small stress of meeting with new people and is clearly passing through that challenge with flying colors, right? It's a small stressor, definitely would have created some kind of a stress in the child or the person dealing with it, but it was not that huge, and they knew that they had a support system, tiny little green people you can see, so who are around the child, that he knows that the child can fall back onto these people in case he's not doing very well facing with this difficult situation. And the child faces some level of stress but deals with the problem. In another instance, you have a bigger challenge, a bigger problem, right? The little yellow problem in the middle, which is death in the family. Now, that death in the family is a huge issue, right? People would really struggle dealing with it, and your body would immediately go into fight or flight mode. But even in such a huge problem, people who have secure, nurturing family environments, who have support systems to fall back on, for people to literally pull them out of these problems, will still experience tolerable stress, will still go through the whole process. But it is still their body's healthy stress response that they would be dealing with. On the other hand, toxic stress comes in when there are these giant red boulders that a person is facing on a daily basis of abuse, neglect, parental addiction. So how does that happen? Next slide, please. Earlier, I had spoken to you about secure family environments, right? Where healthy communication is happening, children are talking to their parents, and they grow up feeling safe, secure, and that is a great predictor of the development of non-cognitive abilities, right? On the other hand, are homes which are not so secure, which are not so nurturing or safe for the child. Now, what do these homes may look like? These homes may have abuse. It could be physical abuse or verbal abuse. Maybe there's a lot of fighting happening, be it verbally, be it in the form of hitting. There is neglect, emotional and physical, which means the child's physical needs or the emotional needs are not being taken care of. And thirdly is household dysfunction, which could look like maybe there is some kind of an addiction, maybe either parent or some close person in the family is addicted to some substance. Maybe there is separation or divorce in the family. It could also look like a parent being in jail, or maybe parents just having a lot of stress in their own lives that they're not able to pay attention to anybody else. Now, all of this sounds like such huge things, right? We don't naturally see a lot of this happening in most of our children. And this is where I need to stop, pause, and say that it need not always be so visible. These insecure family environments need not always be so visible. So when I talk about neglect, it can be something as simple as a teenager who doesn't feel like he belongs in his own home because there is nobody at home that they can go to when there is a problem, because their parents do not understand where the child is coming from and they're not able to respond the way the child wants them to. On the other hand, if the parents are having enough stress of their own, maybe financial stresses or job stresses or any other kind of personal problems, where they are not able to pay attention to the child, that is still a home which is not very secure for a child to grow up, right? So on one hand are homes which are very secure, which lead to the development of good socio-emotional skills. On the other hand are homes which are not so secure, not so safe, not so nurturing. Children who come from these homes experience greater toxic stress. Okay, they experience this stress way more often than children from more secure family homes instance. And they also lack a support system, in these times of need when they are facing a difficult stress. And as mentioned earlier, greater toxic stress. So coming from families where you experience greater toxic stress has been linked to poor academic outcomes because it actually impacts your brain chemistry. The way that your brain functions gets impacted and continues to do so in the long run. Okay, next slide. So here are on the slide, you can see some signs of stress in a child, right? So if our children are coming from a stressful environment, what does that look like? It looks something like this. The child can be very moody, irritated. They're not interested in activities. Maybe they're very worried all the time, a lot of crying. They have surprising, fearful reactions. What does that mean? Like suddenly something small happened and the child just gets really scared. And this is more than you would expect in a typical child. This is not the amount of fear that this child showed was not, appropriate with respect to what happened. Maybe they cling to parents or teachers too much. It could also look like sleeping or eating too much, too little. Maybe they disturb class again and again. Maybe they have anger issues. They're getting into fights. A whole bunch of symptoms could be there, right? And this is a list that was given by the American Psychological Association. So let's hit a pause. A lot of information was given to us. Let's do a quick individual reflection. This time, I will not ask you to share it with everybody. I just want you to note this down for yourself in your own notebooks, just for you to get thinking. So when you're looking at these symptoms that I just read out, which are on the screen, is there a child that comes to your mind? Write down that child's name. Secondly, try to think, why does the child show these symptoms? Okay, just come up with a hypothesis. Why does the child do this? And thirdly, what factors in his family environment might contribute to this, right? So just, I don't expect you to have a right answer or a wrong answer. It is just think about it and try to come up with a possible solution for any child who's showing these symptoms. What do you think could be causing them, right? 2 minutes by the clock. This is silent time. Let's just start with. All right. In the interest of time, let us move on. Again, as I said, you don't have to share this. This is for your own personal thinking. In case you were not able to collect your thoughts right now, feel free to do that after this session as well. Right? So up until now, I spoke to you about cognitive and non-cognitive abilities, how do they develop, especially in the home environment, and how a stress response affects the development or hampers the development. And then we looked at a few signs of stressful children and tried to think back to our own classes and tried to understand why might this be happening, right? Now I'm going to hand it over to Preeti, who's going to talk about how these non-cognitive skills can develop as a result of child's interaction with their school environment. Preeti, over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Parimisa. Thank you, Ananya. So we have looked at so far the importance of these non-cognitive or social and emotional skills for academic development as well as overall development of a child. And in recent times, education systems all over the world are realizing its importance. And there has been a push for teaching these skills in the classrooms. So in India, our national education policy talks about these skills. They call them the social and emotional skills. And many state boards have something called moral science classes. The CBSE board has something called the life skills education classes right now. But like Ananya was saying, the foundation of these skills is built in early childhood, in homes and with the families, right? So where do we all as educators fit in? Is there something that we can actually do to help children with non-cognitive skills in our schools? Now, researchers have been thinking about this for a while. And one of the first thoughts was that we could reward desirable outcomes and somehow discourage undesirable outcomes. And then the child would feel motivated towards, working for the rewards. So for example, we give out stickers, stars for good academic work. We have ranks, prizes, awards. And our hope is that the child will work harder, do more difficult work so that they can get this reward. And at the same time, we try to discourage undesirable outcomes. So if we can see that a child is not doing very well, we will make them stay back sometimes during break times to work on their assignments. We may say, hey, you're not doing well. I'm going to call your parents and talk to them now. So we can threaten them. Sometimes we shout at them. Sometimes in extreme cases, teachers even hit children. Now, does this work? Research says no. What usually ends up happening is that the children learn to do just enough to get that reward or just enough to avoid the punishment. So it stops being about the learning and it is more about, just wiggling through the system and either get the reward or not get the punishment. Now, another thing that was tried and that we're doing right now is to have classes that discuss these non-cognitive skills like the moral science classes or the life skills education classes. Now, this works, but only to a certain extent. It helps children to become aware of these skills, but it doesn't necessarily help them to develop these skills. So it's like saying that you know how to cook a certain dish because you've read the recipe, but you've not actually made the dish yourself. Right. So another example I can give you is a scenario where, say, two children are playing with a toy and after some time they start fighting over it. They both want it. They start pulling it. They push each other. They start shouting at each other. They hit. They start fighting. And then an adult overhears or sees and walks onto the scene and says, hey, you should not be fighting. This is not good. You have to share. Come on, give the toy to each other, give the toy to the other child and say sorry. Just end the fight. Say sorry right now. The children will resist for a while and then after some time, one of them will give in, throw the toy down, say, fine, sorry, and walk off. And you can see that they're still, really seething with anger. So what has happened here? An adult has come in and forced the child to say sorry. But have they really learned to share? Have they learned to forgive? Have they learned to resolve their own issues? Probably not. Okay, so these two approaches don't work. But researchers have found that there is something we can do. It's not that this is completely out of our control. There is something that we can do in our classrooms and our schools. And interestingly, many of these researchers or educators, they have come to similar conclusions about how to do this. So what they say is that if you create the right kind of environment, the right kind of culture in your classroom or in your school, then the child will be encouraged to practice or to use these different non-cognitive skills. And then in using them over time, they will develop these skills. Now, what do these environments or these schools look like? It's an environment in which the children feel three things. They have to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of independence, and a sense of growth, right? So what do these terms mean? We're going to get to that shortly, and I'm going to show you the work of three researchers or three educators, and we will go through each of these terms. So the first set of researchers that we are going to see is a set called Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, and they are from the University of Rochester in USA. And this is what they had to say through their observations. We are mostly motivated by not by the material consequences of our actions, but by the inherent enjoyment and meaning that those actions bring us. When teachers are able to create an environment that fosters relatedness, autonomy, and competence, students are much more likely to feel motivated to do that work. So they say that hard work or the motivation to do hard work, it does not come because of external rewards. It's something that has to come from within, and it will come from within if you can create an environment that fosters or that supports relatedness, autonomy, and competence. These are the three words that these two researchers have used. So relatedness is basically a feeling of connection. It's feeling like you are an integral part of your class. It's that sense of belonging. Autonomy is independence. It's the feeling that you have control over things, that you have some choice. And competence is the feeling that you have the ability to do something well. It's the feeling of growth, that you are capable of doing something challenging. Right? So it relates to those three words that we looked at: belonging, independence, and growth. Now let's move to another researcher and educator, Maria Montessori, whom you may have heard of. And Montessori classrooms are known to be mixed age classrooms and places where you learn by doing. Now, Maria Montessori also identified certain needs of children. And she said that for children to really be engaged in the classroom, to really flourish at what they're doing and to be the best people that they can be, you need to have three things in your classroom. And she termed these as group instinct, which is nothing but the relatedness or the belonging. Then there was the responsibility. Now this is related to independence. I know it sounds different, but it is basically having freedom or having choices, having independence within certain defined boundaries. And then she spoke about great work, where she says that children want to do challenging work. They want to do complicated work. They don't want just repetitive worksheets that they have to keep doing. Instead, they want to feel like they have achieved something. So they want to feel a sense of growth. There is one more theory that I want to introduce. It's called the flow theory. And it talks about how the best kind of learning happens. And it says that learning happens when you are challenged, but you know that it's okay to fail. So if you can look at this diagram on the side, you can see three circles, three zones. And the first one is this comfort zone, the one in the center. Now, comfort zone is like extreme safety. You don't have to do anything different. Everything is fine and everything is taken care of. But when there's an environment like that, you're not really learning. To be learning, you need to be pushed just a little bit outside of your comfort zone. There has to be a reason for you to work hard. You have to be challenged a little bit, right? But again, you cannot be pushed so far outside your comfort zone that you enter the panic zone, where you are afraid, you feel threatened of what will happen if you don't understand or if you can't do something. So it has to be just right. Also, children need to know that even if I fail, I can go back to that comfort zone. Somebody is there to take care of me. So they must be able, they must be challenged, they must be able to feel their own growth, but they also need to have the independence to be able to decide for themselves whether they want to engage in this or how much they want to engage. So we have seen three examples now of research that suggests that, it's centered around these three words: independence, belonging, and growth. And observations from several studies show that if you are able to create an environment like this, you will find that children are much more enthusiastic. They're much more engaged. They're willing to work hard. They're willing to do difficult work. They want to take ownership of their work. They want to work together. Basically, they want to use non-cognitive skills. And in doing so, they develop these non-cognitive skills. Okay, great. So this is what we need to do. We need to create environments with independence, belonging, and growth, and non-cognitive skills develop, right? But why does this happen? What is it doing to the child when you create an environment like this? So there was a researcher from the University of Chicago called Camille Farrington, and she asked that why question. Why does it happen? Why does this environment work for a child? And what she found is that when you have an environment like that, the children start to feel a certain way and they start to believe certain things. They believe that I belong in this academic community. This is my group. These are my people. I'm here with them all. My ability and competence grow with my effort. So they know that if they work hard, they can do something well. I can succeed at this. They believe that they can do this and that this work has value for me. Whatever hard work I'm putting in, it's actually worth the effort and worth the time. So this is the sort of mind frame that you want to get children into to start using their non-cognitive abilities. An example I would like to give here is of a child learning to ride a bicycle. So I know there are some parents who can make this stressful, but usually when a child wants to learn to ride a bike, a two-wheeler, they usually come to you themselves and they say, hey, I want to learn how to ride this two-wheeler. Can you please teach me? Can you help me out? So it's their own autonomy. They're coming to you out of their own choice. And then what do we do as parents? We usually say, all right, let's go do this. And, we maybe give them a helmet so that they don't get hurt. And sometimes we have to maybe push them just a little bit because they have that initial fear. So you have to encourage them to get past that fear. But you're always there to catch them if they fall, or if they fall and get hurt, you're there to take care of them. And you're constantly cheering them on. So the child feels like, hey, this adult is not just here because they have to be. They're here because they want to be. And I want to be here. And this is cool. We're doing this together. And the child knows that if he or she fails, the adult is there to take care of them. Also, the child knows that if I put in this work, something really good is going to come out of it at the end. I will be able to go and ride my cycle with my friends on my own. I won't need the training wheels. So this is the kind of mind frame that children need to be in. Now let's take a little pause and think back to the very first question that Ananya had asked you about your favorite teacher. Right, so I want you to think about, just for say half a minute, about how that teacher made you feel. What did you feel when you were in that teacher's class? And some of you, already answered this question in the chat box. And maybe you can identify some of these themes that we spoke about. Maybe you can identify belonging, independence, growth, or you can identify some of these statements. I belong in this academic community. My ability and competence grow with my effort. I can succeed at this. The work has value for me. So this is something to think about later. Now let's go back to the children from the low stress and the high stress homes. So when a child from, say, a low stress home or a positive stress home comes to your classroom, they usually come to your classroom already believing in these things, because you remember they've had that foundation of non-cognitive skills already established. So they come to your classroom already believing these things. And then when you offer them this kind of environment with belonging, independence, and growth, these beliefs get reaffirmed. They feel like, yes, this is really good. And they continue to explore their non-cognitive abilities and they continue to develop them. But what happens to children who are from these high stress or toxic stress homes? So usually these children, when they come to you, they don't believe these things. In fact, they believe the opposite of these things because that's what their experience has been like so far. So they feel like nobody likes me, nobody wants me here. Even if I work hard, what is the point? Everyone's always shouting at me. I'm not going to be able to do this in any case. So these are the children that are in desperate need of this kind of an environment. And research shows that over time, they do start believing in these statements. And over time, they do start practicing their non-cognitive abilities. Okay, so what can we do as teachers? What can we do to create environments like this? We have created a list of questions. These are just yes or no questions. And I will read it out. Do children enjoy being in my classroom? Do I have a personal connect with them? Do they have opportunities to connect with each other? Is everyone involved in making decisions? Are the activities thought-provoking and requiring effort? Do I offer choices in work? Do I let children take responsibilities in academic and non-academic work? Do I offer timely feedback? Is it okay to make mistakes? Do I offer support when someone struggles with academic or non-academic work? Do I offer safe spaces to discuss our emotions? So some of you may have answered, or many of you maybe have answered a yes to these questions, and that's great. If you haven't, it's something to think about. This is not an exhaustive list. It is just a starting point for you all to start thinking about it. So we will take a small pause here. That was a lot of information for everybody. And I'm sure we all need a little bit of a break. So we will now be watching a video. And this video is from a Teach for India classroom. And as you watch this video, I want you to look for examples of independence, of belonging, independence, and growth in this classroom that you are seeing. So that could be maybe the teacher is doing or saying something, or maybe the children are doing or saying something in this video that makes you believe that, oh, this classroom is that kind of a classroom. So belonging, independence, and growth. Let me just share it. Give me a second.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Saraz Ali. My school name is Lord Krishna Public School.
All right, eyes on me.
1, 2, eyes on you.
Okay, so before we start the phonics lesson, we haven't sung our countdown song today. How much time is left for our exams?
2 weeks.
Okay, we're going to sing the superhero song. I need energy, I need excitement.
We work all day and study all night. We work all day and study all night. Give us 2 weeks, we show our might. Give us 2 weeks, we show our might. Everybody clap like wherever you can. Everybody clap like
Faster.
Everybody clap like wherever you can. Everybody clap like wherever you can.
Thank you. We're starting with me telling you what to do first. We're moving on to partner work and then finally group work.
Yes, I like Didi. Didi teaches very nicely. She's so brilliant. She teaches like amazing.
So short A and long A. Since we've done this, you're not going to hear much from me. I want you to turn to the person next to you. We just need one whiteboard between the both of you. Please talk to your partner. Find one word each at least.
More thing, 5 line, okay? Thing. Then Nirali Didi is not here. I don't know I'm something, I'm only dumb. Didi, we are finished. Then now I'm so fast. But we think 5 now only, but see.
She helped me to do phonics, math, perimeter, area, anything. What I ask her, she tell me.
E, what's the sound?
Ellie.
Long E. Think.
We are reading the book called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. It is my favorite book ever.
So we're discussing the potions master. And who is this potions master in Harry Potter?
It teaches us personality traits.
What about his personality? What do we know till now?
I like Ron very much because his personality is extremely good and he's very kind, and he doesn't like Hermione because she's bossy.
Solution is the what? The answer. There are many solutions to your problem? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes? Everybody is participating and everybody has ideas. So everybody's solution is fine. I don't want solutions which the author gave you. Okay? I want you to be thinking, to be imagining of a better solution. Why I'm giving you one question as a team is so that you can all think together. We're going to have more brains to think together to get better solutions. Okay?
When Nirali Didi is not there, then I cannot speak in English. I don't know how to answer the questions. Not Nirali Didi is come there. She tell us and we are changed a lot.
I don't want all 4 solutions to be call up Hagrid, call up a ghost, call up Dumbledore. Please think creatively. Okay? Start.
A good teacher have a personality like Nirali Didi, and the other teachers give us only one chance. If we don't give other chances, how will be able to learn? One chance is not important, other chances are also important. One, not one time, second time, third time we will get.
Okay, so Hermione is going to do magic on Snape, and then he'll stop ignoring her. Okay, why not?
He say, don't think you are an assassin. You think you are a brave boy and confidently say you. Because is it the question? So what is the answer? We are pretty. And you say what you say? And Hermione But how he said to him?
You do that to a teacher. Do you think this is a solution then? If you're going to do that to me, you'll lock me in the bathroom if I ask you a question. So, come on. No. Think. You can lock. You're saying you lock yourself in the bathroom.
But you don't know the magic. No, not called. Oh, we are done. Didi. I feel so delighted that Nirali Didi is here. Adi, I always sing, I come today, all day come.
The house, it was fancy. The house, it was grand. With high-tech new gadgets and glorious fans.
When I grow up, I want to be a lawyer because I like to bring the justice.
My dream is to be a sailor. I want to travel the whole world and sail the whole ocean. I like to be kind, that my father all is proud of me.
So you make a complaint to Dumbledore about it? What else can you do to fix this problem?
I feel very excited. I feel very joyful that I will go to school and I will learn new things. Because school is very extremely good. All people can take anything, but knowledge is the thing that anybody cannot take from you.
All right. So I hope you were able to find some of these examples of belonging, independence, and growth. So let's just take a few minutes. Yeah. Let's take about 5 minutes for an individual reflection now. If you haven't finished jotting down notes about this classroom, you can do that in these 5 minutes. And I want you to also think about your own classrooms, your own school, your own practice. What do you do to support belonging, independence, and growth? And after 5 minutes, we will hear from those of you who want to share. So it's not mandatory, you don't have to share, but those of you who would like to. So we'll start the 5 minutes now. There are some suggestions from Nagarjun uncle. He says teachers to consciously develop humorous nature and work on their joking and storytelling. In terms of grit, individual projects and presentation opportunities, projects should be 2 types, teamwork based and very individualistic. First of the above in elementary and middle school, second one related to high school. And then there is a question from Chini. Outside elementary education being tied to the ICSE curriculum, to what extent is Vikas Vidyavanam able to encourage student autonomy? To what extent is VVV's curriculum transaction still dependent on traditional blackboard teaching and book-based individual practice? Don't students need the ability to shape the curriculum they are going through to have any sense of autonomy? So, okay, that's a loaded question. I guess something to think about for the VVV community. So before I hand it back to Parini sir, just wanted to share, some of you shared the strategies you're using in your classroom, and this is, another list of strategies that we had made. Circle time, less lecture time, more group work, long-term projects, mixed age groups, goal or task setting by children individually and in groups, self-evaluations, one-on-one conferences with teacher, parent-child teacher conferences, school or class community tasks. So looks like many of you are already doing these things. Some of you aren't. You can start thinking about them. And if you are already doing these things, hopefully now you know why they work and how they support non-cognitive skills. So it would be a starting point for you to now start discussing these things in a more structured and formal manner. All right, so I will stop here and I will hand it back to Parimi sir.
Thank you, Ananya, Preeti, you did a wonderful job. However, నాకు బాగా అనిపిస్తున్నది there's a lot more interaction needed for the teachers, and I think we would continue this the essence of what we were talking about non-cognitive skill development further in the near future. Okay. One thing, Professor Apparao Garu, who is the founding member of Vikasa Educational Trust, is we 7 people, we started this society, and he was a founding member and he worked in the governing body for quite a few years. He signed in for this, and he is very much into this professional development of teachers at a university level and all that. But he's down to earth person. He's there, and I want him to share a few of his reflections on this.
Professor Parimi Garu, Nagarjuna Garu, Suresh Garu, and Preeti Parimi Garu, Ananya Singh, and all teachers, very, very good evening. Quickly, I shall give my reflections. First of all, these non-cognitive skills are so important that they have great impact on cognitive skills. I strongly believe, based on my experience in higher education. Incidentally, as a hobby, I have been interacting with students of various groups, even in school, even preschool, elementary school, high school, higher secondary school, as a hobby. So without non-cognitive skills, I think it is incomplete. So first thing is, whether you consider preschool, elementary school, or high school, or higher secondary school, at any level, if you really have to play a role as a teacher, the first thing is empathy between teacher and the students. Only when you have empathy, it makes a lot of difference in the teacher and your students. You kindly read Carl Rogers, done excellent work and made an impact. He was a social psychologist. As you enter into the class, once you have empathetic relationship with your students at any level, the first thing is they have a lot of positive energy. They start enjoying, right? They have already connected with you. That's the most important thing. Without that, you cannot really make an impact on non-cognitive skills. Non-cognitive skills, when I say, it is practice in terms of physical activities, in terms of change in behavior, change in their emotions, having more emotional intelligence. Cognition gives you intelligence quotient, but EQ is considered to be much more important than IQ in making a better individual, holistic individual, and a better human being in the society. Right? Then I think many activities you have mentioned, I really enjoyed. I agree in totality with the planning, group, everything, whatever that have been shown in the slides. Here, there is one thing which I have learned in my interaction with little children more than with students of higher education. Openness. When we organize activities, teachers, most of us, unless we consciously, continuously reorient ourselves, we have a preconditioned outcome of the activity, right? So at any level, that should not be there. You may have a plan, right? So about the activity, but with the respect to outcome, it is necessary that the teacher should be open-minded. There may be different ways of playing with a toy, different ways of doing even activity. You may have guided, but the child should have greater autonomy of learning. Doing an activity, even approach, doing activity, the outcome, let it be different. What is important is participating in activity and then enjoying learning. Those are important. Very often, teachers unnecessarily interfere in their learning, right? So unless we have to consciously do that, right? So I'm extremely happy, 15 to 20 minutes teachers time, teachers talking time, and for 40 to 45 minutes students time, doing all activities, that is wonderful, right? So this openness is very, very important. And for that, it is necessary that teacher has to continuously orient even inside the classroom. It is dynamic. It's not that you are there to organize an activity in a pre-planned way. You are there, it is everything. You are learning together. Teacher and students are learning together. In higher education, I implement practically out of my experience and the feedback from the students. Why? The students give a very positive feedback about a teacher. All these things play a very important role. And then comparing even the outcomes. Please don't compare the outcomes, right? Please don't, right? Every outcome is very important for that particular child based on his or her competence or efficacy, interest, and all that. Please do not compare. Even a little effort, appreciate, and even appreciate the action, not the child. Differentiate that, okay? Then this is a great thing. Reflecting upon ourselves is a great thing. Then it makes a great change in you as a teacher. So there is a lot the school, the teacher can do, even to undo what the teacher, the student is. Some students are under great stress in the home environment, in the community, but the right kind of teacher can definitely even undo that kind of stress. Because a lot of time the child enjoys with the peers, with the right kind of environment, with the teacher. So that removes the stress. However, if you have the right kind of home environment, community around has a great, tremendous influence. The society we live in, the value system, we all have great influence. Their positive things reinforce each other. But we are living in a very non-violent society. We are living in stressful homes, non-violent homes, because of ignorance of many parents. But a right kind of teacher with empathetic relationship with all that can make a lot of difference in the student. And then even in spite of wrong homes, in spite of the kind of societies we are living in, a right kind of teacher can make a holistic development of the child. So I'm very happy to share my opinions in this session. Sorry I have taken a little more
Oh,
time.
that's all right. Thanks, Master. And what you have said wonderful things, which are definitely a positive reinforcement to whatever the VMME is doing. And I hope that you spend even through this uh, online connection. I hope you could spend more time. Maybe any of the follow-up sessions, we would request you to be part of it and try to give your input to the the whatever the program that we are doing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. We are already, 20 minutes more than what we originally planned. We thought 1.5 hour session, and I'm glad we did this session. And I see once it is done, I see what kind of value this is going to bring to us, and I'm sure our teachers have a lot to take it from this session. And let us hope we will try to implement some of the ideas shared in this session. Thank you very much.